So I'm curious, in Jamaica, do you confront these big companies, Syngenta and Bayer?
Yeah, man, that's how it works. You got to pay to play, and that's who are educating extension and the schools. So they come and they have a junket, and they're going to push whatever the chemical is. They're going to take them out to lunch. They're going to hotel rooms. I mean, whatever it is going to take, trips, whatever, to make sure those products get into Jamaica. If you call right now and you ask extension or the government about anything organic or naturally grown, they say it can't work. Like 40 years ago, we didn't have these things. What did your grandfather do? And they go, oh, yeah. And then we're trying to get them to remember that we didn't always do it this way. And they still had great yields.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast, an Anthem Award-winning show recognized as one of the best sustainability, environment, and climate podcasts, and named one of the best climate podcasts by Earth.org. I'm Linley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic label that distinguishes crops grown in healthy soils and animals raised on pasture, without synthetic fertilizers or toxic chemicals. You can look for our label in stores, find a farm near you on our website, and tune in every Tuesday for a new episode on your favorite audio podcast platform or video on YouTube. Before we get into this week's conversation, choose an episode that you've loved and text it to a friend that you think would enjoy it too. You can send them an email. A personal recommendation helps our show reach more people who care about real organic farming and the food system. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Real Organic Podcast, where we interview policymakers, journalists, farmers, professors, activists, chefs, and more, all working to reinvigorate the organic movement. You just heard from Nicola Shirley-Phillips, past president and current board member of JFOAM, the Jamaica Organic Agricultural Movement. Nicola sat down with Dave a few months back and shared how the modern-day green revolution mentality is affecting food production in Jamaica. This means that all government-endorsed agricultural education and inputs like fertilizer and pesticides, they're exported from countries like the U.S. and solely meant to encourage an eventual dependency for the profit of chemical companies. As you'll hear Nicola explain early on, Jamaican farmers are historically quite familiar with the concepts in organic, which many call Ital, a Rastafarian expression from the word vital, which means pure food from the earth with living energy, locally produced, and that has not been influenced by corruption or other societal harms. I hope you'll enjoy hearing from an organic champion in Jamaica.
All right, so welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm talking to Nicola Shirley-Phillips today. Nicola, it's a pleasure. We just met, and it's wonderful to have an activist and a witness coming from Jamaica. And what I want to do is help people from all over the world listen to this, but undoubtedly the majority are in the United States. They've never been to Jamaica. They know about the bobsled team. They don't know much about it. And you have been working pretty hard down there to try and grow organic. So could you talk about that? First, is there much organic in Jamaica, or is it something that completely got missed?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think that Jamaica, for the most part, is kind of the counterpart revolution or evolution when we talked about the Rastafarians. And remember, they have Ital as a brand, and they were also part of that movement in the, I would say, 60s and 70s about, kind of clean food. So we've been actually doing this, but under not necessarily the organic, but under Ital, trying to eat clean, trying to stay away from all that chemicalized food that was coming in. That was a kind of culture to what was going on. So even though it's not necessarily the organic label, early on we've been doing that work in Jamaica. So it stems a lot from that point of view. And I think for us, the label came in a different way than maybe in the US, where you're looking at, mothers with babies wanting to have clean food. For us, organic came to us more through an academic way, through the University of West Indies, where there were some professors wanting to look at that. And actually some people that wanted to have really organic coffee being certified or getting it certified. So there's a grassroots movement with the Rastas, But then the word organic really came through University of West Indies and that very kind of academic pursuit.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's how.
that's interesting. So in this country, organic came from the farmers and then the eaters. And what's coming from the academics now is agroecology. And
Right.
I know in great parts of the world that comes from the peasants. And so we see these different words that are talking about very much similar things. I think when organic began, it was very politically active. And certainly agroecology was very politically active. And, so for me, organic doesn't mean certified. It
Right.
doesn't mean you're not certified, you're not organic. I think certification is important and it has value, but it also can be a mistake. I mean, not a mistake, but it can be used. It can be used for
Right.
bad purposes.
Purpose. Yes,
So
absolutely.
just to be clear, for me, organic is about how we think and how we farm and how we eat. And it does not have to have a government certification to be real organic. Yeah. So that's interesting about the Rastas. So they were really into. Are they still into clean food? Is that movement still strong?
The it is still there, but what I'm finding the younger generation is actually there. It's kind of weird at a very interesting point. I think we're all at a very interesting point in our history right now. So when I came back to Jamaica, I thought definitely all clean, mostly clean. And then what I saw was a lot of the agroceutical folks have kind of taken over Jamaica. And so the Rastas were there. But then I started seeing them creeping into using a lot of these chemicals. And that's a lot because of our Ministry of Agriculture and the education that the like we have a ag college case, College of Agriculture, Science and Education. But they were taught through, this kind of green revolution growing. So that's what, if you ask extension to help you with a problem, they only know one way. They only were trained one way, and that's what they would often share with somebody. So you might have a farmer and maybe it's a Rasta farmer that is growing something that knows really you shouldn't be putting these things on. But if they're doing a crop and they're about to lose it, they're going to ask for help. And then what's going to be shown to them is these chemicals. And so
Yeah.
it's kind of shifted. So I'm seeing where they're playing. And even with ganja, which they know that, people are going to be smoking this stuff. And it's supposed to be clean and it's obviously not. So if they're going to lose a crop, and we always say that when humans run after the natural world for profits, what follows is always some kind of devastation and destruction. And so that's what we're seeing. So if the person is growing it for a profit and they see their crop going to fail, they're going to lean on. They don't necessarily know all the natural things that maybe a lot of the newer organic farmers know how to use, integrated pest management, all that stuff. They're not doing that. They're going to listen to extension, and extension is going to only know how to do it one way, and it's going to be with some chemical that is harmful.
It's of course it's changed in the U.S. a bit for sure, and there are now a fair number of extension people who understand there are other ways. When I was young, there weren't any, and extension was quite simply not our friend, and
Right.
USDA was not our friend, and they're still not all that close, but they've gotten friendlier. I'm
Right.
curious. What you talk about, the Jamaican version of extension and the government agency, and they're kind of preaching green revolution. Was that explicitly taught to them by the U.S. government? I know that there was a lot of green revolution. It wasn't just government. It was Rockefeller Foundation that was funded in Mexico and India. Did that extend to Jamaica?
Well, absolutely, absolutely, because for Jamaica, we are the English speaking, like often the head or seen as head of the English speaking Caribbean. So we definitely got that. I mean, we had USAID here for many, many years, and many, different agencies coming to help us with our agricultural system, right? So if it wasn't banana or pineapple or some yams or something that would ever Scotch bonnet peppers, whatever those things are that were going to be imported because I'd like to remind people that we're considered the near south. So a lot of the things that we grow obviously was designed to grow for North America because you have a large Jamaican and Caribbean population there. And so exports. So we actually have a whole USDA station that helps us with our phytosanitary, that anything going to the US. So very much
Okay.
influence, right? And we have probably 2 million people that lives in the US, right? And so that interconnectedness that happens. And so
Yeah.
a lot of the information and training that came to the various universities and schools through USAID, through even the farmer to farmer program, came in that way. So they're bringing the knowledge that they had at the time, and it really wasn't anything about anything organic or permaculture, any of these kind of things. It was only what was being taught to everybody. So we got the brunt of that. So if you had a problem, you would depend on the US to try to solve it because you're the next neighbor that would have that information. And so even now, research, when we look at something, we're looking at something, we might be going on one of the websites that is really based in the US to get information of some solution because we are the
Yeah.
near south. You know,
Yeah.
we could, yeah.
I know it's like we're passing along these secrets about, hey, have you tried this? We're doing it here with farmer to farmer too.
Right.
It's the leadership on this mostly doesn't come from government. I'm curious because in the U.S. for sure there is a conflict between many farmers and the industry, the input industry, chemical fertilizers, chemical pesticides, and they write many editorials and put out a lot of information about how what we do is impossible. We will all starve to death if you try to do that, but we're doing it and it works. So I'm curious, in Jamaica, do you confront these big companies, Syngenta and Bayer? Are they in the marketplace? Are they flexing muscle? Are they spending money?
Yeah, man, that's how it works. You got to pay to play. And so what happens there, if you call right now and you ask extension or the government about anything organic or naturally grown, they say it can't work. That's just a standard line. It can't work. And so what you do see is, I mean, they're also for instance, we have a couple companies that are here and they bring in all these different synthetic and whatever chemicals that come in. And it's all about obviously are going to be supporting whichever political party's in, and they're going to be part of that. So they're going to grease the wheels. They're going to lobby. They're going to ensure that their products and stuff comes in and is very much there. And it's because the small island, you get to see a lot of that actually play itself out. So there's a big stake, and that's who are educating extension and the schools. So they come and they have a junket, and they're going to push whatever the chemical is. They're going to pay, we say in Jamaica bling. They're going to give the hats and all that paraphernalia. They're going to take them out to lunch. They're going to hotel rooms. I mean, whatever it is going to take, trips, whatever, to make sure those products get into Jamaica, and then they're also shared throughout the island. So that's really how it works. And so there's a very, very big emphasis on that. So when we come now with our organic self or trying to do something natural, every extension officer in Jamaica would say it can't work. And so that's the work that we've been now trying to do to show them that it wasn't always like this. I always remind them, like 40 years ago, we didn't have these things, right? So how come all of a sudden it's the only way that we grew? And when you look back in history, World War I, even World War II, I think would be the point where Jamaica was actually sending food to Europe, to UK and different places, US. They didn't have any of those chemicals, but we did feed a number of countries through when we had the war. So we were able to do that, knowing that it's always been a very export driven. That's why the whole enslavement thing happened, is because they're that exploitative system, and we didn't have those things, but yet so we always had yields. Obviously, it's slavery, but also just even some of the management practices. And if you go back and you speak to some of these extension folks, or just people, I'm like, what did your grandfather do? And they go, oh yeah. And then we're trying to get them to remember that we didn't always do it this way. And they still had great yields. So now, they put all this stuff and they're seeing their yields obviously decline because of the amount of chemicals that are being used. And I think that even we talk about the webinar that we did, which was Pretty Dirty Food. And the numbers that you see that for the small island that we import so much chemicals, and a lot of it is absolutely banned globally. Like what is that? And the whole Ministry of Agriculture is totally in support of it. It's just know that since I've been trying to get them to do this island-wide, soil fertility project, that there's a little bit of something, but there's a lot of pushback. Extension doesn't come out to the trainings that we do. They're supposed to take the farmers out, even though it's a government project. Extension is supposed to come out. You see one or two people, show up, and they don't know these strategies. They don't know them. So they can't even introduce them to the farmers if they don't even know this, because they've been grown a certain way. And that's why for me, it's important to do that kind of curriculum change. Since I've been back 20 years, I've been trying to get the case at College of Agriculture, Science and Education. That's where a lot of the extension comes from. I've been trying to get them to put a program in. And when I talk to the students, they all want it. But if the faculty isn't trained, then they don't know. And they're going to lean on what they do know, which is really, really outdated information for themselves and also for the whole ecosystem. Like everybody's moving away from that, or at least there's some conversation. But if we're stuck 20 years behind and we don't know this information, we can't teach what we don't know. And so that's where the problem is.
Yeah. Information is a huge part of all this, isn't it? And,
Yeah.
Of course, that's what we're trying to do because we think so many people are working in isolation. I was just talking with Hugh Kent. I don't know if you've ever seen any of the interviews I did with Hugh, but he's the blueberry grower in Florida.
Yes.
So he's in a very hot place with lots of insects, and he uses no insecticides and no herbicides and no fungicides. So interesting. And he talked about when he started, he and Lisa were figuring this out for themselves. They didn't know any other organic farmers, and they were first generation farmers, so they didn't even know very many other farmers of any kind. And they'd go to Extension and they'd say, yeah, if you don't spray this, you're going out of business.
Right.
That was just it. It was a fact.
Yep.
And they were, I think, with great courage figuring this out. But he said when he stumbled into the Real Organic Project, suddenly he discovered there were many other people doing this and succeeding at it. And it was a world movement. And there were people he could talk to and books he could read. And it was a big breakthrough from being so isolated and alone. So I think that's why I wanted to talk to you because, yeah, of course, Jamaica is a part of it. I'm curious, in Jamaica, is the island, do they import most of what they eat? Do they export most of what they grow? How does that work? Are they, how self-sufficient is the island?
Well, we used to be very self-sufficient, but over the years, we've really gotten less and less. And I think the probably numbers are probably about like 65, 70%. And I should qualify that with some of it, more of it is more processed food that we're importing versus some of the vegetables. And even now, so especially because we just had this Category 5 hurricane, a lot more products are coming in. And so we're seeing more and more of those processed items. So we get a lot of American programming, all that television that we get, the Netflix, the this or that. So we're picking that lifestyle. And we also have a lot of our, family members live in America. So they send home barrels of whatever products. And also there are products out there that we'll say for export only. So if you walk into a Jamaican supermarket, you will actually see most of the aisles, it's like you're in, Florida or somewhere else in the world, you'll see a lot of, all the brands of the General Mills products and some of these other things. And so it feels like you'd have no problem if you wanted to, come and shop. You'd see a lot of the things that you normally see. We do have some light manufacturing that happens in Jamaica. So we do have some products that are our own. And I didn't realize it was actually that much. We just had some folks that came from the Virgin Islands and St. Croix, and they were surprised. They're like, oh, wow, you guys have a lot of products that you're manufacturing. And I didn't think that we had enough. But
Yeah.
actually, we actually do have some things that we actually make that is Jamaican brands and that kind of stuff that is here. Obviously, not a lot of, I would say organically labeled products at all, really. And that's the work that we are trying to do now, is to get more of that work being done, where we can actually have some light manufacturers so you can actually see some of those products in our stores and our shelf, because the supermarkets do ask for it, but where production is not up yet. And it's hard to do that when the ministry is saying it can't work, or the extension is saying it can't work. So farmers that might want to go and, lean in that direction, they're being told, no, man, it can't work. Or even a lot of returning residents that come back who've had that North American experience or the UK experience and know the difference. They're asking for clean food, or they want to go back to farming and start farming. And then they go to extension and say, no, man, it can't work. It can't work. And also the other major issue is that we don't have enough people trained to work organically. So when people come to me and, our team and say, oh, we're returning resident, we have family land, we want to grow, we know about organic because we're eating that way, more so in the US, they know the difference. And I said to them, who you have to work? Because there's nobody trained, not many people trained. I have to bring in people from Earth University in Costa Rica, or we do work with different people that are in the US that will they can only come for 3 months at a time to come and help put a system in to take them through a cycle, because the people have only been trained a certain way. So we don't really have a number of people that can come out, or extension to come out and say, this is what you would do and this is how you should set it up, or anything. And that's one of the reasons that we started our program, which we can talk about a little bit. But yeah,
that's great. It's interesting. When I was talking with Hugh, we were talking about how complex the organic system is. It's just we barely know what's going on. We know to get out of the way. We know to do things, to be stewards. That's what they talk about in organic, be a good steward of the soil and the insects and the whole system. But it's too complicated for us to really understand. It's just we can appreciate it. But I was thinking about how hard it is to give advice or to show a model to someone who's just starting, because in a system that is working, you almost don't dare go in and mess with it.
It's good, right?
Yeah, you go and just spray that pesticide to kill that one insect, and it has a lot of unexpected consequences. So suddenly you have another insect problem because you wiped out 2 beneficial species that were keeping the balance going. It's complicated. We need a lot of research, don't we?
We do need a lot of research. And it's interesting you brought it up, because one of the things that's been happening with me is I keep talking now about organic intelligence, right? And instead of this AI thing, I'm all about OI, organic intelligence. And I think that, one of the things that the Rastas would say, or just any of the indigenous people, is obviously sitting in nature and let nature talk to you and show you. And I've really been really advocating that, because there's a whole system that is going on here that's, under the surface, or just in that next layer of an invisible world, that is a whole interaction that's going on that we need to be reconnected to. And I think that's one of the things that we've kind of got disconnected from. And we're moving in a direction that we need to really get reconnected. And I really believe that plants will tell you, will show up and tell you, and even in sitting in my meditation, in my space where we are farming, whether on Source Farm or on the research station, the plants are speaking, literally, like, we will work with us and we'll show you how to do this. And that's humbling, because it makes you really think about, like, you don't know anything. You really don't know what you're doing. And so to kind of step out of that, thinking of knowing, and really sitting with the plants and have them show you that, just information like, that we were sat and we did a meditation with a tree, and the tree was like, yeah, we are always here talking. You guys are just moving too fast. We need to slow down. And it's the base frequency of the planet. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? And it really is about that. And so, we talk about organic is really about that organic intelligence that we should be really connecting with, and they will show you the way. And I think that most of the people that are having successes around this work is really about making that connection and listening and trying to follow and not try to go too big too fast and it's slow solutions and all those kind of things. And I think that if we do that, that's a direction I'd like to see us move more into, in that like that divine connection where we that is going to help us navigate all the things that we're trying to go through, is being able to listen to that invisible world, which the plants are very much part of.
Yeah, I love that, Nicola. It's, I mean, that goes beyond we need more research. That's like we need more wise people to help to guide us and to maybe to teach us to be a little more humble and, as you say, listen a little more carefully. That's an interesting idea. I see. I look at the complexity of these systems and I see the tiny amount of research that is done for organic and the huge amount of research and support that is done for chemical agriculture. And I realize how inappropriate it is, because organic is what we all want. I mean, you'd have to be crazy to say, I would rather have food sprayed with pesticides. Nobody would rather have that except the person who sold the pesticides. And even they, often that's not the food they want to eat. They won't talk about that, but it's interesting that a lot of the wealthiest people in America are very careful about what they eat. And
Absolutely.
even if they're making their money off selling Fritos, they're pretty careful about what they put in their own body.
Yeah, and I can really testify to that because my first background is my first degree was hotel food and beverage management. So I came at food from that direction, and I was a caterer and a chef for many years before returning to Jamaica, and so I've cooked in and for very wealthy people over the years, and yeah, they have there's a whole organic garden that's there, and yep, a different diets, some of it, a lot of it microbiotic diets, and they're not eating that crap. They're just not. And so I think coming from that perspective, and and so to see it, and then just to see the mass production and the influence, the really, that food is and have on people is really amazing, and trying to explain that to folks is kind of interesting. So we have a bunch of work to do to kind of get out of that dysfunction, but it is there, and yeah, they don't eat that. Yeah, I can 100% tell you that because I've worked for many companies, and even when I had the restaurant, I would get invited. I had my catering company first, and then I had a restaurant which we still did catering, and we get invited to these, to do these because we had a lot of ethnic food. We invited into these different companies and private homes and stuff, and yeah, but to make sure that stuff that's coming in is clean, and that's one of the reasons to that for me even returning to Jamaica was just, I was like, okay, it really was a personal thing. I need to figure out how I can eat clean or just organically and or naturally, whatever the title. I just needed to make sure that a lot of things that I was getting in the U.S., my herbalist doctor friend told me, he's like, you have a better chance of living living a longer life if you get out of this food system. And I was like, huh? I mean, I knew it, but then when I came back and then I saw a lot of things that were still being done traditionally and organically, but then I saw the growth of a lot of the processed foods and a lot of the chemicals also being there, and that was a really shock to me. And so really a lot of it, this whole, for me, the movement from my perspective or where I was living came out of that, of like, how do I get more people to plant? So I couldn't plant everything in a good rotation, just like all the things I wanted, and it was like very intense. So I said, let me see if I can teach some other people in our rural community some of these practices. And not that many people that from my community, Johnstown, came, but other people across the island came for the first workshop. So we did permaculture first to kind of give them the grounding of like, let's set this place up in holistic, at least have a better way of setting up these, systems. And then we would do the organic farming piece of this, trying to show them how they can go about doing some of the stuff without spraying up the place. And that's what started for me of really self-interest about how am I going to get some clean food in this place. And then that's what the outgrowth that you kind of see. And then, of course, partnering with Jamaica Organic Agriculture Movement and doing a lot of this work. And then I think you saw maybe the other video with Chuck. I don't know if you know Chuck Marsh or Tony Cleese. I don't know if you ran into those.
I don't know.
They're not on the client anymore. They kind of transitioned, but they were major folks in North Carolina that did a lot of work. Chuck did a lot of work in permaculture, because when Molson came around, he was part of the first class that Molson taught. And then Tony, coming from an organic standpoint, he did a lot of Carolina farm stewardship stuff and was very influential, even with the NOP. I know that you interviewed Jim Riddle. Right. So Jim, there's a whole team of guys and girls that came down through those guys to kind of help us look at the whole value chain of doing an organic movement in terms of what we need to do when information. So we're very much connected in that way. And about 70 volunteers that came down beautiful. And are still coming, that are still connected to us and stuff. Yeah. So we have some good people out there that's rooting for not just Jamaica, but actually the region, because whatever we tend to do in Jamaica, it spreads throughout the Caribbean. And so we have that influence where whenever we're doing the trainings or whatever, they're coming, we're writing the handbook on the organic standards or policies. People are looking to us in the Caribbean for that body of work and the trainings that happen. So it's a good system. We just need to do more of it.
All right, Nicola, I want to hear about what you're doing and what you hope to do, what you think we can do. But first, I just want to go a little bit deeper to my understanding of the agricultural history of Jamaica. And I mean, it has a big history as plantation crops, right? Big mass export crops. What were those crops?
So it first started with, actually, the two main crops were indigo and sugarcane. Yeah. So those are the two things. Indigo, because at least in the UK, the only thing the thing that they have there was called woad, which would allow you to have that blue. And only royal people wore that blue. And so when they got to North Africa and realized that they also had that indigo plant, they wanted to grow that because, of course, everybody would want that blue because it was something that was kind of restricted. So they did that indigo, grew a lot of indigo, lots of money on the indigo. And then that's why you have the blue jeans, right? They're able to produce enough indigo so that you could just dye that fabric and everyone would have access to that blue. So that was one of the main things. A lot of people don't know that or even remember that. And then it moved into sugarcane. So the sugar for the rum, sugar as well. Everybody wanted to sweeten their teas for the UK. And so that was another crop that was a major influence.
That's a big export, both of those big export crops. And yeah, I believe there was a sugar boycott in England, right? It was their way of opposing slavery.
Right.
And they said, we won't buy, which is a big deal for people to give up sugar because, if you're used to putting sugar in your tea and then you don't, you go, I miss my sugar. But it was a big deal that it was a big boycott and it was pretty successful. It went on for a while. It was pretty successful. So.
And then after sugar, there's not much sugar being produced now. We're actually importing sugar, which is a little crazy. So we did bananas, and then we had some of the larger people shifting to banana. And then we had NAFTA, so that knocked that out in the early 2000s. What is being exported now is.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask how did NAFTA hit Jamaica?
Right. So once they kind of once the sugar thing was kind of, a number of the sugar factories closed. And so there were still some mainstays, but then a lot they picked up on the banana. And so they had a special trading status with the UK to sell bananas into that. And then unfortunately, Dole and Chiquita was like, we want, even though they had 90% of or 95% of the entire banana market, they wanted the whole hog. And so they went after, through Clinton, the UK, and wanted to break that special arrangements that they had with them, because through the colonies they were like, well, what are we going to do? So they broke that. And so because of that, all those banana plantations, not just in Jamaica but through the Caribbean, that have been planting bananas, you hear about the banana boat and the banana boat song, all that stuff, is that direct thing for the UK, with the Cavendish planting those bananas and selling. So for years we used to have the banana boats would come in, pick up, and then go back to UK. And so because of that, Dole and Chiquita won, and they got rid of a lot of banana plantation, which of course put a lot of people here out of business. They gave some money, but the money was, of course, I would say appropriated by the government, and not a lot of the things that was supposed to happen with that in terms of retraining farmers and so that really didn't play itself out. And that's what kind of when I came back into the system, into Jamaica, right when they were trying to liberalize that agricultural sector with around banana. And
Nicola,
so since
can you explain, just for people, because of course lots of people have no idea, how did NAFTA work? Why was this a lot of people don't know what NAFTA is. I mean, so what happened in Jamaica because of NAFTA?
So because of NAFTA, they said that it needed to have a balanced playing field. And so because of Jamaica having a special trading agreement with UK, with England, around this particular agricultural product, the US, well, Chiquita and Dole could not sell into the UK market. In terms of they couldn't sell into the UK market because they had a special trading agreement with the Caribbean islands around this banana thing. So they were kind of locked out of it. So through NAFTA, it forced us to open up this trade route. And it's a similar thing that, from in Mexico to the US, opening up these corridors for people to be able to sell into, right? So any restrictions,
especially the corn.
Right. So everything would be opened up, but of course these small islands will never be able to compete with these larger companies. And so hence they made that, the people had to make the shift because they couldn't fight them. You can't, little Jamaica trying to fight Dole, right? It's not going to happen.
Yeah, something that somebody explained to me that, it wasn't obvious at first. It wasn't that American corn growers could do corn cheaper than the Mexican corn growers. It was that the American U.S. corn growers were heavily subsidized by the government in all the ways we talk about, in research, in price supports, in crop insurance. So they were guaranteed to make a living. And so when they sold their corn, it wasn't fair. It wasn't actually a free market.
It's not.
Free market's very hard to get to, isn't it?
Right, very hard. So this little island could not compete, and so they just had to.
Okay.
I
just wanted get a little about so what happened to agriculture in Jamaica when you lost the banana market to England?
Well, I mean, exactly. It's not just the agriculture market, but the people in the livelihoods, because people had depended on the whole sector for this particular one, at least that one crop they could guarantee getting some resources in and paying these people. So it really affected it. When the place went into, the physical depression, mental depression, because the people had no, what was the next thing they were going to do, the livelihood issue. And so trying to figure out what was the next market, what would they also end up doing? So a lot of people in our region, which is we had actually in the east, which is the parish of Inlands and St. Thomas, Jamaica, now says St. Thomas, Virgin Island, was the largest banana plantation or estates was in that parish. So of course it got really affected. All these people lost their jobs, and never really, to be honest, got shifted out of that. So it's interesting now. I'm hearing them coming back and saying that they want us to start growing banana again, and I'm like, what? After all of that, now to set all that industry back up again, and it was really automated. It was really, they were really doing it, and then now to start, it's like, what are you talking about? So these things happen, and then the Cavendish, which is one of the bananas that it has a particular disease now, and so in many years it soon won't be able to be grown. They have to come up with other varieties, which I think if Jamaica had thought about it, they would have shifted out of that mainstay and gone to some of the other kinds of bananas, some of the fancier, more kind of gourmet thing, and shift the market. So now I think they're looking at some of that, and even just start to do a value added products like we do that, our banana chip. They could have pivoted and gone with other value added products. We tend to be asked in these islands to do raw materials, right? And then obviously it's for export. They want that price point. But we're trying to now shift into more value added products that not just can be, exported to US, but actually we have a whole region of people that we should be selling into, because the US has the entire Caribbean and Central and South America to sell into. And we often don't think of ourselves as being a marketplace to consume these things, because it's always been a focus of external, for external extraction sales. So you want the foreign exchange. So you're working to be able to send things overseas so you can get the foreign exchange, not understanding that, everybody else is looking at you as a marketplace. And you see that when you go into supermarkets, you see, very clearly that this is really a market. And I don't think many other farmers think of it as that. I think now that a little of them are shifting because they can start taking things up the value chain and start selling it into our market. And they're looking at selling into the Caribbean and even South America. So very small little incremental changes, but that's what's happening, I see.
So, of course, if everyone in America, the majority of food is ultra processed that people are eating. It's from the middle of the supermarket, not from the edge, not from the dairy case, not from the vegetables, not from the meat, not from the eggs. It's all from that. It's all the Pringles and all of that stuff. Is that true in Jamaica as well?
Actually, we're really blessed for right now that it's not. You do see some of the processed foods, but people are still very into eating their yams and their banana and their cocoa, and if you're in the rural area, you probably know the person who grew your chicken, even though that whole poultry thing is a whole other conversation that we need to have, because all the eggs all that stuff is really coming from the US. The grain is coming from the US, and all we get to do is just grow up the chicken in 6 to 8 weeks, and that's it. But at least those chickens are being grown, and the people who have them a lot of women who tend to take on this endeavor, and at least they're still feeding them some of the local products like the coconut trash that they grow from when they make their coconut oil, or then they do their rice and peas. They're giving them some healthy things. They're giving them callaloo. They're giving them what you call amaranth. So they're still feeding those birds something a little bit more natural. So you find people are still wanting to drink, like have their fruits. So the guavas and the soursop and the neeseberry, the fruits are still very seasonal. So they will more gravitate to moving towards a traditional diet. But I see in Kingston, which is our capital city, where I see a lot of the fast food chains like the KFCs and some of the other chains are coming in, and people who normally would make a Sunday dinner, I see them lining up for KFC, which is right. Well, that never used to happen. But we still love our breakfasts with our ackee and saltfish and our yellow yam and our banana, boiled banana. So they're still getting a better nutrition from that. But I see it shifting, right? And I'm seeing, the kids are getting all these little potato chips bags and all that kind of stuff, which is not good. We need to try to replace that with some healthier things. And hopefully this is some of the work that we want to do in terms of our organic movement, is to create some more healthier snacks for folks. So they have access.
So let's go to that. But one question first. The motivation, there are kind of two general motivations pushing people to organic, and one is to be healthy, and the other is to live on a healthy planet. And of course, it all comes down to health in the end, because if you're living on a sick and degraded ecosystem, it's not going to go well for you. But a lot of people in America are thinking very literally, do I want to eat that potato because I think it might have pesticides in it, or it might be nutritionally deficient because it was grown in a way that doesn't enhance life in the soil. And other people are looking at it and thinking, I want to do something that will help to address climate change, and I want clean water, and I want clean air. I don't want that CAFO. I'm not going to eat the meat anyway, but I don't want that confinement livestock because I don't want to get sick by having to breathe it. So I'm just curious, in Jamaica, in your young organic movement that is growing, is it clear that one of those is the force, or is it all?
It's really the health issue.
Yeah.
It's really the health issue. I think, it's interesting because when we're at the farmers market, we can tell the people who the doctors have sent them with the list. You see them walking around with the list, and I'm like, okay. And I go over and I'm like, all right. And they tell me which doctor it is. And you see them come through and I'm showing them where this and this and this and that they can get. And it's really the health issue. That's what's really pushing it, because, we have returning residents that come and they have a lot of health issues that are coming from wherever, whether it's UK, Canada, or the US. That's where the majority of people are. And they're giving them, I give you an example. It's interesting because when I lived in Philadelphia and I had a restaurant there, and I would hear these stories at the counter where somebody would get diagnosed where, they're giving them 6 months to live. And they go home to Jamaica and then they come back and they go to the doctor and they can't see where that cancer was. And the doctor's like, what did you do? And they went, they drink the coconut water, they're eating cleaner foods, they're getting all that stuff out their system, they're doing that detox, and that's what it is. And so the people that I see shifting they're shifting because of health reasons, because they're having all these kind of things that we now normally have. Yes, we may have diabetes because of the amount of something starch, but even with some of the sugars and stuff that we're seeing now, that is what's happening. And the doctors are shifting them, having that conversation, and they're looking out for that. And they're coming to our spaces for that. And that's, yeah. Or we also have a lot of people that, as I said, coming home and they know about clean, they've been given a prescription or something that they need to eat healthier, and they're coming for that food. So, and I think people are now waking up to the idea of what is happening with Monsanto or Bayer and the spraying of the glyphosate. Very slowly, people are realizing that the amount of chemicals that they're getting, so they're trying to make that shift. So it's really the health. It's more health than, let's clean up this environment, which is kind of interesting because Jamaica's major, earning is really tourism. And Jamaica has painted the place as this beautiful, pristine beaches and all that stuff. And they've done lots of studies, and what the tourist is asking for is locally grown and organic food when they come. And they don't understand that most of the food that they're getting is actually imported into Jamaica, right? So they have all those larger, food service operators on a ship sending everything down. So when they go into these hotels, they think they're getting something that would be locally grown, and it isn't. Very, 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 very small percentage of that is. And if they're getting it, it's all sprayed up, right? Yeah. So we've sold, in terms of the marketing of Jamaica as a very clean space. But if you look at the amount of pesticides and chemicals that we're using on our food, it isn't that. And of course, that is leaching into the water, which is affecting all the coastal. They just did a study, University of West Indies, Dr. Reed study it. They found 40 different pesticide residue in the grouper fish that's not only around Jamaica, but also in the Caribbean when they're doing the testing. So all that residue now is running off of the farmers' fields into the springs and the ocean. And, you're selling this pristine product and it's supposed to be a luxury brand you're trying to sell now when the whole place is really, really affected. And so I think we need to clean up our act, and it's going to come through a lot more education. And I'm also, even if for me, I see a lot of the farm stores selling stuff, they don't know sometimes that there's a whole counterpart of things that they can actually sell that is going to be a lot cleaner. Like they could just, there's a whole, oh, you're looking for whitefly, whatever it is that you're looking for, there's a whole world out there of other products that it's not as harmful. And because the ministry itself has not set the tone of that, creating that balance of, because I'm always very practical. If you've been trained a certain way, it's going to take you a bit of time to make that conversion, but you need to make the conversion, and you need to also have all the products and education to allow you to know that if you're going to be working these systems until we get to a point where we can move into that much more healthier system where we're working directly with the organic intelligence of the planet, right? But it's going to take a hot second to get the disconnection to happen. And until that, give us some cleaner products to work with. And so that's the direction I'd like to see them transition into.
Yeah, I love that, Nicola. The organic intelligence compared to artificial intelligence. I will not hear artificial intelligence again without thinking about organic intelligence. That's just spot on. So you are doing all kinds of work, and one of the things you're doing is you went back to school, and you're getting a PhD at Tuskegee, right? Yeah. What's that in? What's your PhD in?
It is integrated public policy.
Okay, so we're back to policy, is that we've got to change the policy, right?
We have to change the policy. We have to. We have because it's gonna, influence so much of the work, and it's really for us. It has to be done because we have to do it from the ground up. It's interesting. We do have a lot of U.S. in terms of another connection to the U.S. to Jamaica. We have a very, robust Peace Corps volunteers that come every year into the system. And they always are asking, there's environmental thrusts, and they always are asking them to set up school gardens, right? And it's a beautiful thing. But because the teachers aren't taught to look through the lens of nature to teach anything, it becomes like, oh, why are they making us do this thing? And so again, it's another disconnection for the children to not understand the environment that they live in. And if you disconnect them, really, to be honest, if you disconnect them from the environment and nature, then you can sell them all kind of crap. You can sell anything, right? So it's so important to integrate the education in terms of we live on this planet, and that we are not, we're not just stewards, we're really divinely connected to everything that's on this planet. And so if we can start teaching and integrating from the teachers' colleges all the way into the, K through 12 for us, and also in all the agricultural schools, we have to shift the policy, because it's been a policy of extraction farming that's been going on. And a disconnection is just about like raping the planet. It's about all those practices that happen, from, Columbus landed, has always been an extractive system. It's not about, organic, any kind of ecological thing. It's always about what is the most I can get and squeeze out of this system. And that's what's left, right? And so we're seeing it on our soils now. Like, we're really seeing it after all these, decades of doing that kind of extraction. Now you start to see where, obviously just laying down fertilizer, your yields are going to be much lower, and you want to open up more and more land space to farm. So we're seeing it now in Jamaica. And so we have to really make a change. And to do that, it really is going to take a hot second. I'm very realistic in this. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to start putting the policy in place so that they have something else to lean on. If we don't share anything else, then they're going to keep saying, oh, it can't work. So we have to now create and integrate those other, an alternative system to allow them to say that you have a choice. You can, if you want to be on the planet, you want to save these soils, you want to keep your luxury brand, in terms of the tourism sector, you better start making these shifts, because if not, you won't have anything to really sell on so many different levels, right? Whether it's food products or a lifestyle, And so I think that that's the kind of work that I'm really interested in, is making that shift across the agricultural sector so that we can start making that reconnection and start, really creating healthier food for ourselves and the next generation.
It feels, talking to you, like maybe Jamaica organic is at a tipping point. And with just a little bit of energy, there's a lot of receptivity. People are ready to go.
Yeah.
Is that how you feel?
I really do feel that way. I really do feel that way. And I really have to give credit to so many people that, really came before me, whether through the members of Joan, also a lot of the Rastas that came and are still there doing that good work. A lot of the musicians, they eat Ital, they eat clean. So I think that, and people tend to look to, even though we have this little dot in the middle of the Caribbean, really, in the world, that we have an influence, and we've influenced a lot of things. And I think that we should continue to do that work in terms of influencing some right consciousness that can happen. And I think through the music, if you listen to a lot of, people love Bob Marley or any Peter Tosh, any of those people, they always had something about a kind of livity. We say livity in Jamaica, the way we want to live. And it's definitely, nature-based. And so we need to kind of always remind people of that. And when people are coming to Jamaica, it's really not just about sun and fun, but is a cleaner lifestyle. And if we want to do that and really promote it, we can. So I think we're at that point where we just need to start, sharing that. And that really is coming through trying to shift the educational framework so that we actually have people that, if we want to have an organic farm and to get more people farming organic, we're going to have to kind of share that information to make them, open up their eyes. And so for me, like doing the permaculture courses that we've been doing here and organic farming courses, I have people that literally cry because they come to class and they're like, why didn't we know this before? And yeah, like you don't know the cycle of how the zones and the sectors and the sun works and the rain and the whole thing. We kind of haven't been trained in that way. And so when you start to really sit back and look at what are we doing, and why are we doing this? It makes people kind of wake up. So I think there's a movement now afoot of making that shift for us. And so we just have to start to influence the policymakers to start to integrate some of that other way of thinking to create a little bit, to shift into that balance that we want to happen.
All right.
Yeah.
Nicola, it's very inspiring to talk with you. I'm curious. We should end soon, but I'm curious if I like to ask people if there's anything that you want to talk, want to say that hasn't come up yet.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we're doing is that we are at a point, and I really, the work that all those volunteers, we had 70 volunteers that came through that USAID program. And that was the first time that the US government ever let organic farmers and permaculture folks out of the stable of the US. As a matter of fact, they said, oh, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. And we were able to show the evidence that people wanted to get this information. So really thankful for all the guys and gals that came down and really did that work, and all the local folks that did that work as well. So we're at a point now where we've had the farmers market. And one of the things that we had when we designed the program with Chuck and Tony and those other guys and girls is that we wanted to be able to have more farmers markets around, right? And we have the one farmers market in Kingston, and we're in the process now of doing a distribution center to try to distribute products across the island, because people fly in and you may come and you want something clean, you call us and then we want to be able to. So we're in a process now with the government trying to get that distribution center up. So always looking, I'm going to do the plug. We do have a GoFundMe page, and we would really love some support. We have some money, but that project started in 2019 and we have to go, it's 2026 and it hasn't landed yet. It takes forever to get things done here, There's these islands. But I feel good about it because I think once we do that, then we'll be able to have more farmers, add to that network of farmers And we've been doing this work. So we've been training up farmers to be able to enter into that space. So just awareness, and also the awareness for people that are coming to Jamaica. When you come, you ask your hotel, where is this food coming from? You ask, write a letter to Ministry of Tourism, like, is this food clean? I want like that asking campaign, because I think from that, if enough people start asking Brand Jamaica, is this Brand Jamaica clean? We would get more farmers. It's a shame that we have a 12-month growing season and we're importing so much food. We need support of our farmers and asking them to, grow more natural, more organic, and to really clean up our system, because it doesn't make sense to come and you're thinking you're getting away from whatever, you stress of life, and now you pop yourself into a system where you're not supporting the ecosystem to be healthy. So I feel like if we could start asking those questions every time you come, think about Jamaica, you come into not just Jamaica, but these islands. What is the legacy that you're leaving behind? Are you encouraging them to do these bad practices of the farming? Because if you're eating it, right, you might knowingly eat clean in the US, and you're putting yourself into a disadvantaged state by eating all this chemical when you come to Jamaica, because it's just on a buffet. So I want us to start asking those questions. And I think from that questioning, then the leadership will wake up and say, oh, wait a second, they don't want to affect their bottom line. And so they'll start encouraging more education, more farmers, more people moving into that direction. And so we would actually clean up this island, and also influence the rest of the Caribbean as well. So
Yes.
anything that I could ask for, that's the biggest thing that I could ask for, is let's, vote with your dollar, ask the question. And I think it's the same thing in the US that we did, right?
That's right.
People kept asking, where is this clean food?
That's right.
That's right. We should do here.
Another amazing benefit is that when they're buying that good local food, the money stays in Jamaica.
Right.
It builds the economy, and it starts to become a virtuous cycle.
Right.
And when you're buying the food and the money goes to LA, wherever, it's just extraction, more extraction.
More extraction. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. All right, Nicola.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is really a pleasure.
Thanks for spending your time with us today. The Real Organic Podcast is part of the work of the Real Organic Project, a farmer-led movement to protect organic integrity and support the farms with real soil stewardship and accountability. You can look for our label in stores, farm stands, and farmers markets across the country. Our weekly audio and video episodes are produced and edited by Jenny Prince and engineered by Brandon StCyr. We also want to recognize our small but mighty team who travels the country inspecting farms and helps to propel our movement forward. We want to say a special thank you to the farmers who get certified with us. Your commitment is the foundation of this work, and we are honored to stand alongside you. And lastly, this show is made possible by donations from listeners like you. Your support helps keep this work free and independent, and we thank you for choosing to support us. If you'd like to make a contribution, please visit realorganicproject.org/donate. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.